So if there was able to be an ultimate grid in Formula One, what drivers would be on it and what cars would they be in? Hi guys, I'm Aussie Villain and welcome to something a little bit different. We're going to have a look at the ultimate grid in Formula One as I see it. Now, a couple of caveats that I've had to do here. I've limited it from sort of 1995 onwards. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, that kind of is the era that I've seen. Most people have seen that era, so it helps to talk about drivers that we've seen. The second one is that it's kind of a year where there's a bit of a split between sort of Schumacher, Hakkinen on, and you kind of leave Mansell, Senna, Prost, and that's sort of the more 80s era behind. And thirdly, it's kind of where the teams, there's not the privateer teams, a lot of them have stopped at that point, and they're taken over by the more manufacturer teams. Obviously, some exceptions to that rule, which we'll find out in just a second. But yeah, so that is the reason I've gone from 1995 onwards. But any driver that sort of career started before that went afterwards as well, I've included the stats from that pre-95 era, and all these stats should be accurate up until the 2022 British Grand Prix. All right, so let's go see who I think is on Formula One's ultimate grid. So let's start with Red Bull Racing, and it really, I think, is probably the easiest team to pick. There's two drivers that have just stood out head and shoulders above everybody else, and they are, of course, obviously, Mark Webber and Daniel Ricciardo. No? All right. Well, we'll go instead with Sebastian Vettel, 113 races for Red Bull Racing. Now, he had 38 wins, which is 34% of his races, 44 poles, 65 podiums, which is over 50% of his races, 58% to be exact. He scored 1,577 points and was, of course, world champion between 2010 and 2013. And the other guy is obviously Max Verstappen, 127 races and counting for him, 26 wins, which is 21% of his races, 15 poles, 67 podiums, again, over a 50% success rate on that front, 53 to be exact. And he has 1,670.5 points, and he was, of course, the 2021 world champion. So next we'll go to the junior team, and there's again one guy that just obviously stands out as AlphaTauri / Toro Rosso's standout driver over the years, and that is of course Pierre Gasly. 83 races for him, the one win in Monza of course a few years back, no poles but 3 podiums, 262 points and a championship best finish position of 9th, which I believe was last season. And the second driver had a little bit of trouble with this one. You could maybe make an argument for Kvyat, you could maybe make an argument for Carlos Sainz, but what I basically did is I went with the driver that I have no personal bias towards and has done the best since leaving Toro Rosso, outside of guys that have already been given seats. So I went with Daniel Ricciardo, 39 races for him, no wins, no poles, no podiums. He scored 30 points and a championship best position of 14th. I suspect that might be controversial, but I didn't really know who else to put in there. Next, let's move over to Mercedes, and again, there are two obvious guys here. The first being Lewis Hamilton, 187 races for him, 82 wins, which is an insane 44% of the races for the team, 77 poles, 135 podiums, which is 72% of the races. He has scored 3,329.5 points, and he, of course, has been world champion 2014, 15, 17, 18, 20, 19, and 20. Of course. So yeah, very, very successful driver for Mercedes. And the other one is, in my opinion, possibly the most underrated driver, if not in Formula One history, then certainly of modern times, and that is Nico Rosberg. 136 races he had for Mercedes, 23 wins, which is 17% of the races for the team. Now, of course, he was there pre-hybrid era when Mercedes dominated everything. He has 30 poles, 55 podiums, which is 40% of his races for the team. He has 1,519 points that he scored and was, of course, the 2016 world champion. Moving on now to Ferrari, and again, one very, very obvious driver, and that is, of course, Michael Schumacher. 181 races for the team, 72 wins, which is 40% of the races he competed in, 58 poles, 116 podiums, which is 64% of those races, 1,066 points. Now, of course, a lot of those races would have preceded the modern point scoring, so if you use those standards, that would be a lot higher. And he was, of course, world world champion with Ferrari between 2000 and 2004. Now, the second driver is possibly going to be controversial, but I have gone with Kimi Räikkönen. He had 152 races with the team. He won 10 races, 7 poles, 52 podiums, which is 34% of his races, scored over 1,000 points for the team, and he was, of course, the 2007 world champion, and that is why I picked him ahead of maybe somebody like Charles Leclerc. You could maybe argue Fernando Alonso, though I suspect he has a seat elsewhere on the grid. You know, you win a world championship for Ferrari, you've got to be in there. Next up, it's McLaren. Now, again, there's one obvious person for this, and that is the great Mika Häkkinen. 132 races for him, 20 wins, which was 15% of the races with the teams, 26 poles, 51 podiums, which is 39% of the races, 407 points, again, predating the modern point scoring system. And it was, of course, world champion in 98 and 99. Now, the second driver, I really had the trouble here. I could not split. Well, I could because I picked one of them, but Jenson Button and David Coulthard. And in the end, I went with Jenson Button. 137 races he's had with the team, 8 wins, 1 pole, which surprised me, but he wasn't really a qualifier, was he? 26 podiums, 908 points that was scored for the team, and a championship best of second for old Jenson there. So that's my McLaren team. And we move on now to Jordan. Now, Jordan are effectively replacing Haas on the grid because, I mean, Haas haven't been around long enough, I don't think, and it would just be Grosjean and Magnussen, and I don't think either of them deserve to be on the ultimate grid at this point, though K-Mag doing well this season, isn't he? So Jordan, the first man I've gone with is, again, I think an obvious one, Heinz Harald Frentzen. 43 races for the team, 2 wins, 1 pole, 8 podiums, 71 points scored, again predating the modern point scoring system, and well, a championship best of third, which in a Jordan is absolutely magnificent. And the other man I've put in this seat is Rubens Barrichello. 65 races he had with the team, 1 pole, no wins, 2 podiums, 36 points, and a championship best of 6th for Rubens at Jordan. And now we go on to the more modern version of the team, which is, of course, Force India, also known as Racing Point and more commonly now as Aston Martin. But 2 drivers for this team, and the first one, again, I think is quite obvious. It's Sergio Perez. 155 races for the team in all their different guises. 1 win, 0 podiums, poles, 7 podiums, 577 points, and a championship best of 4th. And the other guy, again, I had a long think about who it should be, and I ended up going with Hulkenberg. 84 races he had through about 4 or 5 different spells at the team. 0 wins, 0 poles, famously 0 podiums, 299 points, and a championship best of 9th. Next up, it is Sauber. Now, that also includes BMW, Alfa Romeo, and all the other teams. I think it was just those 3 that said, but Sauber basically is the underlying team. So the first driver I have picked is another of the great underrated Formula 1 drivers, Nick Heidfeld. 125 races he had throughout the years with Sauber, 0 wins, 1 pole, 9 podiums, 222 points, and a championship best of 5th. And the second is one of the great untapped talents, isn't it? It's Robert Kubica. 59 races he had with the team, 1 win, 1 pole, 9 podiums, 137 points, and a championship best of 4th for him. So moving right along now to Renault, also to sort of think of it as the Enfield team, so Lotus, Benetton, and of course now Alpine as well. The first guy is, picks himself really, very, very obvious. It's Fernando Alonso, 137 races he's had with the team, 17 wins, which is 12% of the races. Now, given the races he's had recently in Alpine, and we second spell at Renault where the car wasn't quite up to standard, that's not a bad 1 in 10, or better than 1 in 10 is not bad at all. He had 16 poles, 42 podiums, which is 31% of his races. He scored 567 points and was, of course, world champion in 2005 and 2006. And the second man, I had a little bit of trouble trying to decide who it would be, but in the end, I think it's an obvious choice. It's Giancarlo Fisichella. Good to hear the name again. 120 races for him, 2 wins, 3 poles, 15 podiums, 206 points, and a championship best of 4th for Fizzy. Which brings us now to our final team, and a team that has unfortunately become used to being the final team, and that is Williams. Now, this was tough. The first man, I think, again, was an obvious choice in Damon Hill. 65 races he had with the team, 21 wins, which is 32% of the races he had with them, 20 poles, 40 podiums, which is over 60% of the races he raced for them, 326 points, again, predating the modern point scoring system, and was, of course, the 1996 world champion. Now, the second driver was the difficult one. I had a hard time choosing between Montoya, Ralph Schumacher, who did quite well with Williams. But in the end, I went with a very happy-looking Jacques Villeneuve. 49 races with the team, 11 wins, which is over 20% of the races, almost a quarter of the races he had with them. 13 poles, 21 podiums, which is over 40% of the races, and 180 points scored. And he was, of course, the 1997 world champion. So there we have it. That is how I see things. Let me know how you think I did. Let me know who I got right, who I got wrong, who you would replace them with. And if you'd like some more Formula One action, then why not join me at Aussie Villain Racing as I look to get myself on F1's Ultimate Grid. Till next time, take care.